Okay, we are live now. Last week, we studied Genesis 9, verses 8 through 10. Today, we're going to take a much bigger chunk. But verses 8 through 10 said, "Then God spoke to Noah and to his son with him, saying, And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the field with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth." So in the Noahic covenant, the animals are direct recipients of a covenant, that is, direct promise of God. Now in Adam, if Adam had remained righteous, the world of animals would have been blessed and cared for and at peace with humanity. But Adam failed, and therefore the animals did not receive any of the blessings of the covenant intended. But now in the Noahic covenant, God has recognized that humanity will not be the blessing he was intended to be, nor does he rightly act with God or the world. So now God directs a covenantal blessing to animals and humanity both. Then we looked at another covenant with animals in the Bible from Hosea chapter 2, verses 16 to 20. "And it shall be in that day, says the Lord, that you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master. For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their names no more. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, with the birds of the air, and with the creeping things of the ground. Bow and sword of battle I will shatter from the earth, to make them lie down safely. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord." So when will the people of God no longer call Jesus my master, but call him my husband? The end of time, the new heavens and the new earth. And when will idols be remembered no more? In heaven. So on that day, God will make a covenant for his people with whom? Beasts, birds, and creeping things. These are exactly the things that were spoken of in the Noahic covenant. And who benefits from this covenant? Jesus gets his bride, the church. Humans are safe from animals, and animals are safe from bow and sword, which are shattered from the earth so they may lie down safely. That's eternal peace. So this is an upgrade or an update, revisiting of the Noahic covenant. Noah could kill and eat animals, but in the Hosea covenant, in the future, there will be no more eating of animals and no more violence. So animals and humans, though, we do have very different expectations of the future. As Romans, we looked at Romans 8. It teaches that redeemed humans are adopted as God's sons forever. But at the same time, in the end, redeemed creation will be released into the glorious liberty and freedom from corruption. It will end the labor and the birth pangs that the creation has now. So the fall of Adam the king brought about the fall of the animal world, but the success of Jesus, the second Adam, brings the power to save all of Adam's domain that was lost. And then we looked at Colossians 1, 15 through 20. We won't read it again, but it says, "All things and everything created by Jesus and for Jesus is held together by Jesus and is reconciled by Jesus." And it says not just earthly things, but also heavenly things, receiving cleansing by Christ's blood. Now, this is the doctrine that the early church called the cosmic Christ. And it's been largely forgotten in the modern church. But the basic idea is that the redemption of Jesus does not only apply to human souls and bodies. Jesus intends to heal the whole creation, the whole universe. So it's not like the sinking of the Titanic. The Arminians, unfortunately like D.L. Moody, their analogy is that we're on the earth and we're just throwing out life preservers so that the few people can be saved as the Titanic sinks. That's not what Christ has done. What Christ is doing is patching the hole from the iceberg and refloating it and then rebuilding it, making it even better. So he is saving the Titanic. It's not sinking. And finally, we looked at 4 passages from Isaiah. And I will read these again, but we won't comment on them as much. But these 4 passages from Isaiah show that there will be animals in the new heavens and new earth, and they are part of the covenant. So there was Isaiah 11, 6 through 9. "The wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little boy will lead them. Also the cow and the bear will graze, their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like an ox. The nursing child can play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child can put his hand in the viper's den, because they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." So basically, this is a return to Eden, only even a better Eden, because there's more people in it, more than just Adam and Eve. And then there's Isaiah 43, 18 to 21. Do not call to mind the former things, or remember the things of the past. Behold, I will do something new. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will make a roadway in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. The beasts of the field will glorify me, the jackals and the ostriches, because I give them water in the wilderness and rivers in the deserts to give drink to my chosen people. The people whom I formed for myself will declare my praise. So in the end, humans and animals will proclaim the glory of God. We also see that in Revelation, by the way. Everything in heaven and earth and in the sea and under the sea and on the skies and all that's in them. Then we looked at Isaiah 60, two different sections, verses 5 through 7 and 20 through 21. So 5 through 7. Then you will see and be radiant, and your heart will thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the seas will be turned to you. The wealth of the nations will cover you. A multitude of camels will cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba will come. They will bear good news of the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will minister to you. They will go up with acceptance on my altar, and I will glorify my glorious house. And then down to verses 20 and 21. Your sun will no longer set, nor will the moon wane, for you will have the Lord as an everlasting light, and the days of your mourning will be over. All your people will be righteous and possess the land forever. Obviously, the new heavens and new earth. And then lastly, Isaiah 65, verses 17 to 25. Now, I won't read the whole 8 verses, but I'll just do an ellipse, ... to go past a few phrases. So Isaiah 65, 17 to 25. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. Skipping down a little, they will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Skipping down, they will not labor in vain or bear children for calamities. Skipping down, the wolf and the lamb will graze together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, and the dust will be the serpent's food, and they will do no evil or harm in all my holy mountain. So all 4 of these Isaiah passages show total peace between animals and humans and people. Now, dispensationalists interpret all of these prophecies to be what they call a 1,000-year millennium, sometime in the near future. And Jesus will reign on the earth, and there will be rain on the earth, and there will be total peace. But then somehow the wicked world suddenly turns wicked again, and they rise against Jesus to destroy him. And then then there's Armageddon, and then there's the Judgment Day. And then for some inexplicable reason, God destroys the entire planet and all life on it. And they say that all these promises of the future were temporary, even though they say forever and ever. They're temporary. So it just shows that they're wrong. But it also shows that animals are in the covenants that are eternal. So today, that's last week's, that's review. Today we will look at exactly what the covenant with Noah says. And that's Genesis 9, 11 through 17. Now, verse 11, we'll start with that because it is a summary of the covenant. Thus I will establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Now, there's a man named Van Dyke who I've met. He works at the Ausable Institute, which is a Christian environmental sort of place. I believe it's in Minnesota or Wisconsin. I can't remember. Michigan, maybe. But he says this: the forceful assurance of this covenant should not be missed. Verse 11 of chapter 9 has a double negative. So here's another way of translating it. Never again will all life be cut off by waters of the flood. Never again will there again be a flood to destroy the earth. So in other words, he keeps saying never again, never again, never again, over and over in this verse. In Hebrew, it's a lot stronger than it is in English. So it's more like no, 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 never again. That's what God says. Now, I want you to turn back to Genesis 8, verses 21 and 22, because this is what God said in his heart when Noah and the animals first came out of the ark. Now, remember, he did not say this out loud, but Moses, who we believe was the author, said that this is what God thought. That means that the Holy Spirit told Moses what God was thinking, because God never said this out loud. Here it is, Genesis 8, 21 to 22. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I did. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. So consider the difference. That's what we're going to spend most of the time today considering. What is the difference between 8:21 and 9:11? Notice the difference. In Genesis 8:21, God says, "Never again will I destroy every living thing as I have done." Okay, so that means there will be no more worldwide cataclysms. I'm not going to destroy all flesh or the earth again. But now in Genesis 9:11, he says, "Never again will I destroy all flesh," but he adds, "in a flood." So the difference is quite obvious, isn't it? In 8:21, God says, "I will never destroy everything again." And in the next chapter, God says, "I will never destroy everything again in a flood." Now, how should we understand this apparent difference? The modern majority view, dispensationalism, they believe in the annihilation view of the earth. They believe that God intends to destroy the world and start all over again with a brand new planet and brand new plants, I presume, and sun and moon. So they ignore the chapter 8 version, where God says he'll never destroy everything again. That's not what he meant. He really meant I'll never destroy it again with a flood. So 8:21 is wrong, 9:11 is right. That's the dispensational view. Back in chapter 8, though, when I went through this, I spent you 1 full hour showing you how the universe and the earth will last forever. They will not be destroyed. The annihilationist view is a complete misunderstanding of mining terms used by Peter in the book of Peter. When Peter talks about the earth burning and melting, it does not mean destroying. It means refining and purifying, getting the yucky out. So it's when God removes all sin and the consequences of sin. So we spent a whole hour on that a few weeks ago. Last week I showed you that there are multiple covenants in the Bible with animals that are eternal. Now, if there are covenants with animals that are eternal, then there have to be some animals that are eternal, because the covenant means nothing to them if they're not eternal and the covenant's eternal. See? So how do I explain the difference between the chapter 8:21 and chapter 9:11? Both of them say never again, but I think the difference is pretty simple, to be honest. If you assume logically that God does not disagree with himself, and that God would not say one thing in one chapter and a different thing in a different chapter, then we have to discover how these things are agreeable to each other. Now, the problem is that modern Christians are looking at these two verses like modern lawyers, and they're searching for loopholes. They see a few loopholes in Genesis 9, in God's vow in Genesis. You see, we are so much, as a culture, inured by modern lies that we treat any statement skeptically. The news lies, the politicians lie, the advertisements lie, our neighbors lie, everybody lies. So we expect that this might also be a lie, or we're not understanding it right. You know, the best lies are cleverly hidden in semantics. So in Genesis 9, when God says he will not destroy the world by flood, obviously that means that God is hedging his bets. He actually can still destroy the world. He can freeze it into a popsicle. He can melt it into lead. He can vaporize it. He can microwave it. He can irradiate it. He can atomize it. He can drop it into a black hole, or he can burn it into a cinder. So he kept all his options open. He's only promising not to send another flood. That is what we are acting like. We're acting like zealous lawyers looking for loopholes, because we don't believe that God will keep the earth forever. And that's because of one wrong understanding in the book of 2 Peter. And also ignoring all the eternal covenants. It's because dispensationalists view almost every covenant as temporary. So here's what Lodahl writes. It is a sad and predictable move in Christian circles to quickly say, the promise is never again to destroy the world with water. Next time it will be fire. Such a world-denying mentality is at odds with the Genesis promise of an everlasting covenant. It is very far from the spirit of the text to suppose that God holds a fiery destruction card up his sleeve, like a poker player. You know, he wants to trick you. Yeah, we won't have a flood. I'm going to bring a fire. Yeah.
Growing up in dispensational churches, that's what they would say. You know, God will destroy the earth by fire.
Yeah. God will purge the earth by fire. He will not destroy the earth by fire. There is a big difference. So what then is the difference between chapter 8 and chapter 9, never again? In Genesis 8, God tells us his thoughts and his plans. God's plan is to never again destroy the world. By the way, if you think about it, he didn't destroy the world. He destroyed all the life on the world. So he didn't destroy the world. But in chapter 9, God explains this to Noah. So God's explanation to Noah includes the part about never again by flood, because that is the only way that Noah can imagine destruction. He just went through the flood. As far as Noah knows, that's the only way to destroy the earth. Noah doesn't know about nuclear weapons. He's never seen giant asteroids zooming around the world. He's never heard of worldwide plagues. He's never heard of black holes. He doesn't know that the sun spits out giant flares. He's never seen an ice age, etc. So the only way that Noah knows God can destroy the world is by flood. And so God, in order to reassure him, tells you, I will never again destroy the world, especially by flood, is basically what I would say, or including by flood. He's not going to destroy the world again. Flood is just the way Noah knows. So that is the difference. It has nothing to do with God holding back on all the other ways he can destroy the earth. He's saying there will be no more cataclysms like the flood. So don't be so literal. Dispensationalists are hyper-literalists. Everything is exactly literal. You have to understand that even in the Hebrew language, there is variations on what it means. And it doesn't necessarily mean just by flood. It just means including a flood, or along with a flood, or like a flood, or as a flood. So that's the difference. So in other words, these verses are proclamations of God's intentions for the earth after he had destroyed all of the life on the earth in the great flood, except for what was in the ark. You can imagine Noah and his relatives, they would be very uncertain about the future. I mean, I'd be thinking, maybe we should keep the ark. Maybe we should close the door again, keep it just in case. Could God get mad again? So God says, no, we will never do this again. A cataclysm of this magnitude would shake even godly people like Noah to their core. Is it really over? Should we keep the ark in case God decides to wipe out the world again? So in Genesis 8, God said in his heart, he will never again curse the ground, nor destroy every living thing, as he has done in the flood. And in Genesis 9, God tells him that. God does not just declare his good intentions. I don't plan to destroy the earth again, but I might have to. No, God is promising it will never again happen. So how do you wipe out the earth with a fire if you will never again destroy the earth? That's the problem. And in order to prove this covenant, he gives a permanent new physical law on the earth, a symbol called a rainbow. Now, he doesn't actually call it a rainbow. All God does is call it a bow in the clouds. The Hebrew word kas, Q-A-S, just means bow. It means a curved thing. And when it says a bow in the clouds, it means a curved shape in the clouds. And it's obviously a rainbow. There is no loophole here. God is just explaining to Noah about his plan to never again destroy the world. He only mentions the flood because it's the only one Noah knows about. Humans don't know of any other possible ways to wipe out the world. Yeah.
Sometimes we just need to know something that's simplistic instead of, like all the words and whatever. You see a rainbow, we know what that rainbow is representing. God is not going to find the earth again.
Right.
You don't need a whole dissertation of why.
Yeah, and it really, honestly,
Reminder.
it reminds me of Satan, to be honest, looking for loopholes. Did God really say? Did God really promise he would never again destroy the earth? Well, he could destroy it with fire. It doesn't have to do it with a flood. It sounds like satanic ways of not believing God to me. So in Genesis 8 and 9, God reassures the last humans and animals that he will never again wipe out the world. He will never again curse the ground on account of man's sin. Now, if he destroys the physical universe by fire on account of man's sin, isn't that a contradiction? He says he'll never again curse the ground for man's sake, but he's going to destroy the earth for man's sake. It's baloney. They're totally misunderstanding it. The Satan, the great serpent, he says what God really means is he has other plans of doom. You shouldn't be so secure on earth. You should be ready any time to get wiped out. And what do we see on the news now? It's one of the most popular things. There's asteroids flying by. There's solar flares coming out to incinerate us. We're all doomed. There's a new pandemic on the edge going to kill us all. Satan wants you to always be in fear. And you're not supposed to be. That's because he doesn't want you to trust God completely. So I don't believe that this was a loophole. This is just God's way of promising it'll never happen again. So now let's talk about, there is one more passage I want you to see about this, is Isaiah 54. Because Isaiah reinforces what I'm saying again in Isaiah 54, verses 7 through 12. And he even mentions Noah and the flood. So this is God speaking. For a brief moment I forsook you, but with great compassion I will gather you. In an outburst of anger I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting loving kindness I will have compassion on you, says the Lord your Redeemer. For this is like the days of Noah to me, when I swore that the waters of Noah would not flood the earth again. So I have sworn that I will not be angry with you, nor will I rebuke you. For the mountains may be moved, and the hills might shake, but my loving kindness will not be removed from you, and my covenant of peace cannot be shaken, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. O afflicted one, storm-tossed and not comforted, behold, I will set your stones in antimony, and your foundations I will lay in sapphires, and I will make your battlements of rubies and your gates of crystal. So in Isaiah, God promises Israel, I will never again do the flood. But that's not what he's saying, is it? I will never again do anything like the flood. You are secure. Your world is secure. Your city is secure. That's quite a different promise than the one the dispensationalists would give you. There's a great book by Williams, and he writes brilliantly on this topic. So I'm going to read you a little quotation from him. Our visions of the future say just as much about our understanding of God as they do about our understanding of sin and redemption. Whether intentional or not, annihilationist and escapist views of the gospel portray a God who is either too weak to defeat Satan's powers or who refuses to commit himself to his creation. But we find neither of these false gods in the gospel. In the Bible, the deity of ancient Gnosticism was powerless to do anything, but occasionally rescue a soul from the corruption of the physical creation. He will scrap the world because it's so ravaged by sin it cannot be rehabilitated. To suggest that the sin of man so destroyed God's creation that he can't fix it, all he can do is junk it and make a new world, is to say that the kingdom of evil is more powerful than the kingdom of God, and Satan is the victor over God. I agree with that. I think that's absolutely true. That the escapism, the annihilationism, and the doomism of dispensationalism proves that it's against the character of God. But just in case Noah or his sons had any doubt that animals were part of the covenant, God then says 6 times in 9 verses that animals are a part of this new covenant. It's kind of hard for them to miss it. And just in case people forget that covenant, God made a physical earthly symbol called a rainbow. Now, it seems that before the flood, rainbows didn't form. Now, there's a number of possibilities for that. One of them is the water canopy or ice canopy theory around the earth, that's what came down during the flood. And so there was not refraction of light in the same way. Now there is clouds floating in the air, and that's how rainbows are formed, when light comes through water droplets and breaks up. So now we get rainbows all the time. Humphrey Primat said, "Look on the rainbow and praise God who made it. That beautiful, resplendent arch of heaven is the visible memorial of the Lord throughout all generations." I like that phrase, the beautiful and resplendent arch of heaven. That's what he called the rainbow. Now, rainbows are themselves significant in human history as a symbol. Heinberg has a good paragraph here on ancient peoples and their beliefs in rainbows. According to universal tradition, the original earthly paradise and otherworldly paradise were at first united. The means of connection is described in different cultures as a rainbow in the traditions of Japan, Australia, and Mesopotamia. The rainbow was seen as a reminder of a bridge that once existed between heaven and earth. The 7 colors of the rainbow were the 7 heavens of Hindu, Mesopotamian, and Judaic religions. You've ever heard of the 7 heavens? 7 heavens? That's where that idea comes from. Among Asians, shamanic drums were decorated with rainbows to symbolize the shaman journeying to the other world. Babylonian ziggurats, stepped pyramids, had 7 levels, each painted with a different of the 7 colors of the rainbow. So if you think of the pyramids of Giza, if you think more about Inca or Mayan temples, they're more square, not smooth on the side. Each level was painted one of the colors of the rainbow. Very interesting, 7 levels. This is another case of the biblical number 7 having significance, perhaps, the 7 colors of the rainbow. There's a guy named Pember who wrote a very interesting book about similarities between the living creatures, the cherubim, and animals and rainbows. Here's what he said about that. It seems that the cherubim are in some way or another connected with the 4 animal tribes that were lost in Adam's sin. If we now pass on to the time of Noah, notice a striking corroboration of this view we have taken. This may even be called a demonstration of its truth. The covenant that God made with Noah after the flood is said in these terms: Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your seed, and with every living creature, the fowls, the cattle, and every bird, beast of the earth with you. These are the 4 animal tribes indicated by the cherubim in the Noahic covenant. You may further observe that whereas the sign of the covenant was the rainbow, so when you see real cherubim in the Bible, there is always a rainbow visible above them. We'll look at those 4 verses, by the way, or 3 verses. So the promise of God remains sure. He will never again smite all living things as he did in the days of Noah. Okay, so let's look at these verses about rainbows, and that's what these are. Ezekiel 1, 26 to 28. This is the Bible's first clear description of cherubim. If you remember, the cherubim are those strange angelic creatures. They're always called living creatures because they're more animal than angel, perhaps. One looks like lion, an eagle, a bull, and a man are the 4 living creatures. So Ezekiel 1, 26 to 28, after he describes the cherubim, now he describes the scene of God. Above the firmament over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. And on the likeness of a throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. And above the appearance of his waist and upward I saw the color of amber, and the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist downward I saw fire with brightness all around it. Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one speaking. So Ezekiel sees the cherubim, and then he looks and sees what's probably Jesus. And Jesus, the glory that's coming off of him is like a rainbow on a rainy day, but bright. So it's just a rainbow is the picture of the glory of God. So now turn over to Revelation. We're going to look at 2 sections in Revelation about rainbows. The first one is in chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. Revelation 4, verses 2 and 3. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. So now we've got rainbows all around God's throne. So they're around God, and they're around God's throne. And the last one is Revelation 10:1. This one's a little more difficult just because it might not be Jesus. It may be a powerful angel because he has a rainbow on his head. Revelation 10:1. I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. Now, the next verses you'll see, he actually talks about God. So it could be Jesus. It might be an angel. We don't have time to argue that right now. In short, though, it doesn't really matter how often on the earth there are rainbows. When God says, every time I see a rainbow, I will remember my promise, he's not saying, oh, the earth is really bright today. There's not much cloud cover. There won't be any rainbows today, so I don't have to remember my covenant today. No, he's got rainbows in heaven. There's rainbows around his throne. There's rainbows around himself. And there's rainbows perhaps around some of the angels' heads. So he's got rainbows everywhere. And this is interesting in compared when we mentioned the cherubim, that there are living creatures in heaven and that they have rainbows around them. So God's always remembering his covenant with the living creatures. So God sees all the rainbows all the time. And maybe he even produces them. Because if you think about it, on earth, rainbows are caused by physics. They're caused by light passing through H2O molecules and being scattered into a prism. Now, how much mist do you suppose is in heaven? Are there a lot of clouds and rain in heaven? I don't think so. So then how are rainbows produced? Apparently, God's glory produces rainbows by itself. Or maybe it's because of all the crystal. We hear of all kinds of crystal, thrones made of sapphires and emeralds and the floors of glass. Maybe it's light from him refracting through the glass or through the crystals. Don't really know. But in the book of Revelation, it will be Jesus who's the main light source. It says that the sun and moon are still shining, but they won't produce a lot of light compared to Jesus. But I'm guessing we're still going to be seeing rainbows all the time because the glory of Jesus produces rainbows. Pretty remarkable. Now, the word for rainbow is just bow, and it is the archer's weapon of war. So the rainbow then is a redemptive symbol of the covenant, like a peace treaty. It's possible that the symbolism of the rainbow, if you think of the rainbow as an archer's bow, which way is it pointing? Into heaven. The dangerous end is pointed up. It's like when you have a gun, you never point it at someone because that's the dangerous end. Well, the giant weapon of God's judgment is no longer pointed at the earth, it's pointed at heaven because he's sworn it's never going to happen again. The Hebrew word is just bow, a bent shape in the sky. Now, if you don't know it, maybe you already know it, but there's a popular acronym for remembering the colors of the rainbow. Any of you guys know it? Pardon? You don't remember. Okay, well, it's Roy G. Biv. ROY G period Biv, B-I-V. That's because it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv are the 7 colors of the rainbow. Now, the 7 colors, though, all they are is wavelengths of light that your eyes recognize as a different speed. So, in other words, in a manner of speaking, the colors don't exist. It's just the light speed and the way your eye recognizes it. And it's even said that birds see a lot more colors than you do because they have better eyes, more rods and more cones, so they can see more color. But until the 17th century, nobody knew what a rainbow was or how it was made. It was just a mystery. But René Descartes, the villain of animal rights and experimentation, he actually discovered that it was light going through moisture. So he got the first good clue. And then about 50 years later, Sir Isaac Newton discovered, using prisms of glass, that there were exactly 7 colors of a rainbow. However, the truth is, there are only 7 colors to the human eye. There are a lot more colors to the bird eye and less colors to the dog eye. But the truth is, in China, this is interesting, China, for traditional reasons maybe, says there are only 5 colors in a rainbow. They don't have orange or indigo. That may be because when you look with your eyes at the rainbow, you usually can only see 5. Only with a prism can you actually see the 7. But the truth is, the more sharply you define colors, you can have as many as 28 colors. So we just say 7 because that's what we see. Also, I'm told, or the internet says, you can never see or find the end of a rainbow. And that's because it's just light shining through mist. And so no matter what angle you get to, it will always be somewhere else. You'll never be in it. However, there are a few times when, if you're in exactly the right spot, you can see a completely circular rainbow. Usually it's done from an airplane. If you're looking down on clouds, you can see a rainbow in a full circle. So since you can never get to the end of the rainbow, you're never going to find leprechauns or a pot of gold either, by the way. It's also worth mentioning, of course, you know that modern civilization has completely perverted the symbol of the rainbow. But the truth is, Satan's minions have been perverting the truth of the rainbow since the very beginning. In researching this, I've discovered that almost every ancient culture has perverted views of a rainbow. For example, ancient peoples thought that rainbows proved you were fertile. They were bridges between heaven and earth. The Incas thought that they were man-eating dragons going to eat you. So when you saw a rainbow, you'd hide. Okay? In Vietnam, if you see a rainbow, it means you're going to die or get really sick. So not everybody has the same view we do of rainbows. The Greeks, the ancient Greeks, believed that the rainbow was a goddess named Iris. That's where we get the word iridescent colors, from iris. So it's not a new perversion, but nowadays it's the gay and lesbian and transsexual movements that have made the rainbow their symbol. So nowadays, if you wear a rainbow shirt or a rainbow hat or a rainbow symbol, they presume that you are either queer or supportive of it. But isn't it ironic that the actual colors of God's glory, made into a physical reality by weather to prove the covenant to God's people, has been twisted into a glorious symbol of approving evil? So instead of God's holiness being represented by the rainbow. It is now Satan's holiness, Satan's perversions that are shown by the rainbow. So if you wear a rainbow shirt in claiming or believing that you're in solidarity with their evil, it means you're a rebel against God's order and you have a twisted view of what's right and wrong. But God's purposes were not wrecked by the fall of Adam or by the flood of Noah. The path to eternal happiness is taking a more circuitous route. Now I want to read you another paragraph. This is from Marshall. Some people say we've wrecked the world and that what's important now is to rescue people from the wreckage. This point of view is often called lifeboat theology. It is as if the creation is the Titanic and we hit the iceberg of sin, and there's nothing left to do but get in the lifeboats. However, a truly Christian viewpoint is not lifeboat theology, but ark theology. Noah's ark saved not only people, it saved the other creatures as well. The ark did not flee from the earth, but returned to the land to start again. Once the flood subsided, everyone and everything aboard returned again to restore the earth. In Noah's day, God sent the flood in response to the fall in sin. But the story of the generations of Noah shows that even after the fall, God has the same purposes in mind for human beings. Humankind was given a fresh start and new help and was set about its life task again. God established a covenant that he will never again destroy the earth by flood and points to the rainbow as the sign of the covenant. This covenant, one of the dominant themes of the Bible, was made not only to Noah and his descendants, but with the animals also. The rainbow is still an eternal sign between God and every living creature. God cares for all of the creation. God is committed still to the preservation of the world and the process of human history. So in other words, God's plan is not to destroy the world. He's going to fix the world. He's already paid for it, and soon he will renovate it based on the power of Jesus' redemption. So Jesus will remove the stain of sin and corruption and make the earth his throne, and we'll have rainbows everywhere. All right, well, I finished a little early today, so if you have any questions or comments about this. Yes?
I bought a pair of sandals and a tie-dye. First thing I said, Mike, I go, these look like, that was my first thought. And I go, and if anybody says anything about it, well, yeah. It's the lion pride from Lion King. This, they're tie-dyed, but they look rainbowish, so.
Yeah.
It's really sad that you can't even buy a pair of sandals or something without thinking you're gonna be put in that category as the others.
It's the big thing now, yeah.
So,
It's the latest new fad. It's like hula hoops, but hopefully it'll go away just as quickly.
Let's see. Oh, so the warped, like hijacking of the rainbow. I mean, beyond just being like, yeah, this represents, men, perversion between men loving men or those perversions. It's celebrating all sexual perversion.
Yeah.
It's like it's okay to be sexually perverse. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes beyond just like two guys holding hands in a parade and it's perversion of celebrate all sexual perversion.
Well, and it's going to grow. You notice it's gone from LBG, now they have it at TQ, and now they've got a plus because of everybody else. There's the NAMBLA, the men who want to love babies, pedophiles.
Right.
And then there's the bestiality people who want to love animals. There's all kinds of perversions out there.
Right.
They're going to add them on just because anything you want is good. That's Satan's lie. You can do whatever you want. There are no consequences.
When it goes way beyond, like, if someone says no to the rainbow, or, if someone is like, it goes beyond someone personally attacking someone who has a problem, like a man who has a problem with same-sex attraction, or it's saying we celebrate all sexual perversion, like it's okay. We all need to come together and say it's okay. It's weird.
Yeah, I would guess that there are probably people who are gay and lesbian who don't agree with all of the perversions. They probably don't like the pedophiles and the bestialities, but what's to stop them? Once you say that it's okay for me, well, it's okay for him. You kind of have to go there. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, we've got about almost an hour, 50 minutes before we'll start up again.